अच्छा जी, बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। Review. So we finished off with the dural venous sinuses and possible applied anatomy related to the dural venous sinuses. Most of it we've already covered. सबसे important उसमें cavernous sinus and then of course the spaces, they are very important. So now let's start with the nerves that are related to the eye. The nerves related to the eye include the second, third, fourth cranial nerve and sixth cranial nerve, directly related to the eye. Okay? If you remember correctly, and I hope you do, we have already done the optic nerve. Sorry, we have already done the इसको कंप्लीट कर लिया था. ट्राइजेमिनल भी हमने कर ली. All three branches of the trigeminal nerve. ठीक है, ये दो cranial nerves, fifth और seventh हमने already कर दिए. Now we start with the second cranial nerve. अब eye से related cranial nerve start होती है. The first cranial nerve that we are going to discuss, that which is related to the eye, is the optic nerve. Optic nerve is the second cranial nerve. ठीक है, ये जो आपको, this is the optic nerve. Now the optic nerve starts, ये आपको पता है eye के you have three cones. The outermost is the sclera. This is the sclera. This is the choroid layer, the vascular layer, which is the choroid layer, and then this is the retina. Retina is the innermost layer. Retina is the layer that is concerned with vision. So you have a pigment layer of retina and you have a neural layer of retina. Ab retina jo hai na, that is composed of multiple layers. Okay? So before I go on to the retina, मैं simple सी एक बात बता दूं कि ये जो nerve है ना, I'll come back to the retina because it starts from the retina. This nerve is considered to be simply an extension or an evagination of the forebrain. Forebrain का कौन सा part? Diencephalon. So ये diencephalon से arise करती है, directly वहाँ से arise करती है. ठीक है? So अब ये हम रेटिना की जो बात कर रहे थे, ये रेटिना की इनरमोस्ट लेयर है. इस इनरमोस्ट लेयर में गैंग्लियन सेल्स है. गैंग्लियन सेल्स आर न्यूरॉन्स. ठीक है, हर न्यूरॉन का एक एक्सॉन होता है और एक डेंड्राइट होता है. सो यहाँ पे जो इनरमोस्ट लेयर ऑफ द रेटिना, यहाँ पे जो गैंग्लियन सेल्स हैं, the axons of these ganglion cells, they make up the optic nerve. ये जो सारे axons हैं, they pass out of the eyeball. अब retina is the innermost layer. So ये जो axons हैं, pierce करते हैं all these layers of the choroid को भी pierce किया, sclera को भी pierce किया, and this is how they make up the optic nerve. Now, I just told you that optic nerve is considered to be an extension or an evagination of the forebrain. Okay? So, if it's a part of the forebrain, then it has to be surrounded by all the meninges. Brain is surrounded by the meninges. So, any extension from the forebrain will also be surrounded by the meninges. So this is the dura, this is the arachnoid, and this is the pia. And between the arachnoid and pia, this is the subarachnoid space. So optic nerve, considered to be an extension of the forebrain, formed from the axons of the जो ganglion layer है, ganglion cells की जो layer है उसके axons, ठीक है? And since it is an extension of the brain, it is surrounded by the meninges from outside in. This is the dura, arachnoid, ये pia mater है, this is the optic nerve. Between the arachnoid and pia mater is the subarachnoid space, और subarachnoid space में you have cerebrospinal fluid, जिसको हम CSF कहते हैं, ठीक है? अब यहाँ पे देख लीजिए, running in the center of the optic nerve, ये सारी की सारी जो है ना, this is the optic nerve, this yellow, and these blood vessels, artery and vein, this is the central artery of the retina, and this is the central vein of the retina, which runs through the center of the optic nerve. This is a branch of the ophthalmic artery. The central artery of the retina pierces all the meninges and passes through the subarachnoid space, and then comes to lie in the center of the optic nerve. Okay? This artery, a branch of the ophthalmic artery called the central artery of the retina, pierces the meninges. Kiss level pe? In the anterior 1/3 of the optic nerve. Optic nerve तो इतनी लंबी है ना, इसके anterior part में it pierces the optic nerve and runs to the center of the optic nerve. आप यहाँ पे ये देख लीजिए, ठीक है? अच्छा, up to here till it pierces the optic disc, ठीक है? Till it passes through the optic disc, till it pierces the sclera. यहाँ तक ये जो axons हैं, they are non-myelinated, ठीक है? Then when it goes out of the sclera, they become myelinated. Okay. यहाँ once it comes out of the sclera, after piercing the sclera, these axons of the optic nerve, they become myelinated. And the other thing to remember is that, now please note, this optic nerve is passing through the sclera, the outermost layer. Now when 1 million axons pass through just this small space, obviously it will convert this sclera into a cribriform like area. Cribriform होता है sieve like, छलनी की तरह. इतने सारे axons गुजर जाएंगे, तो वो तो बेचारा जो स्क्लेरा है इस हिस्से में, इतने हिस्से में स्क्लेरा एक छलनी की तरह उसमें सुराख हो जाएंगे बेशुमार, 1 million सुराख, ठीक है? So that is why this part of the sclera through which the optic nerve passes and converts this part of the sclera into a sieve-like structure, इसको lamina cribrosa कहते हैं. स्क्लेरा का lamina cribrosa, और यही पार्ट जो है यही आपकी ऑप्टिक डिस्क कहलाती है, ठीक है? This is lamina cribrosa. ये posterior most part of the eyeball में होता है. ये जो होगा ना, this is lamina cribrosa, ये ऑप्टिक नर्व है. अच्छी जगह. अब in the orbits, the two optic nerves, they run posteriorly and medially. Posteromedially run करती हैं, arising from the eye, from the ganglion cells of the retina. They run posteromedially in the in the orbits. Okay? Then they enter the optic canal, and when they exit from the optic canal, obviously they have now entered the middle cranial fossa. Passing through the optic canal, they enter the middle cranial fossa. Middle cranial fossa में pituitary gland के ऊपर these two nerves cross each other. The crossing of this nerve is chiasma, optic chiasma. So optic chiasma is a structure formed by the crossing over of the two optic nerves. This optic chiasma is lying in the middle cranial fossa, pituitary fossa के ऊपर, right on top of the pituitary glands. अब इसमें आप ये देख लीजिए, the two optic nerves, ये orbit का roof खोली हुई है दोनों sides की. The two optic nerves running posteromedially, passing through the optic canal. When they exit the optic canal, they enter the middle cranial fossa, ये pituitary fossa है बेटा, and the two nerves are crossing each other, forming an optic chiasm. अब आप यहाँ पे तो गौर से देखिए, ये एक आई बॉल है, ये दूसरा आई बॉल है, ये मिडलाइन है. सो दिस पार्ट ऑफ द आई, हम रेटिना की बात करते हैं, इज द, अभी हम मिडलाइन में सेंटर में, दिस इज द नोज, ठीक है, दिस इज द नोज, यहाँ पे साइड्स पे टेम्पल्स होंगी. सो दिस इज द nasal part of the retina. This is the nasal part of the retina in this eye. This is the temporal part, या lateral part of the retina. This is also the temporal part, या lateral part of the retina. ठीक है. अब दूसरी चीज आप ये देखिए कि the nasal part of the two retinae, इधर का भी nasal part, इधर का भी nasal part. The fibers arising from the nasal part of the retina, they cross each other. ठीक है, ये देख लीजिए, जो nasal part of the retina से fibers arise कर रहे हैं, they cross each other. लेकिन जो lateral या temporal part से fibers arise कर रहे हैं, ये देखिए, they remain uncrossed. यहाँ पे भी देखिए, the fibers arising from the temporal half of this retina, they remain uncrossed. ठीक है. अच्छा जी, अब ऑप्टिक chiasma तक हम पहुंच गए. Arising from the posterolateral angles of the optic chiasma, you have the optic tracts running posterolaterally. ठीक है. अब इसमें आप ये देखिए कि ऑप्टिक ट्रैक्ट में, ये ऑप्टिक ट्रैक्ट है. ऑप्टिक ट्रैक्ट में, I am talking about the right optic tract. ठीक है. So इस right optic tract में you have uncrossed fibers from the right eye and crossed fibers from the opposite here, left eye. ये देख लीजिए. ठीक है जी. सिमिलरली अगर हम इस साइड पे आ जाएं, तो वी हैव uncrossed fibers from the same eye, जबकि इस opposite eye से crossed fibers आ रहे हैं. So optic tract में you have uncrossed fibers and you also have the crossed fibers. That is right half of both retinae. एंड ये ऑप्टिक ट्रैक बना दें। अब दूसरी चीज आप ये देखिए कि यहाँ पे आई है। नाउ व्हाट यू सी व्हेन यू लुक अहेड, तो सामने देखते हुए, आपको बिल्कुल स्ट्रेट देखते हुए आपको जो नजर आता है ना, उसको आप विजुअल फील्ड कहते हैं। पर यहाँ पे एक चीज देखिए, ये जो लेफ्ट विजुअल फील्ड है, that will be seen by the right eye, और राइट आई की भी ये राइट साइड, जो राइट विजुअल फील्ड है that will be seen by the left eye, और उसका भी टेम्परल साइड। ठीक है, सो जो नेजल साइड से टेम्परल साइड पे विजन आपको नजर आती है, जबकि टेम्परल साइड से आप देख सकते हैं टेम्परल साइड को नेजल हाफ ऑफ द रेटिना दिखता है। अभी तक समझ आई है? Any questions so far? No questions. Okay. अच्छा, ये जो मैं पढ़ा रही हूँ ऑप्टिक नर्व और बाकी जो मैंने नर्व्स पढ़ानी है, ये आपके बुक के एंड पे क्रेनियल नर्व्स का चैप्टर है, ये उसमें से मैंने सारा देखा है। ड्राइंग्स ऑब्वियसली वहां से नहीं है, मोस्टली इंटरनेट से ली गई हैं, बट उसमें से अब आपने फेशियल नर्व, ट्राइजेमिनल और अपने ऑप्टिक करवा लिया। ठीक है, तो ऑल दिस हैज टू बी स्टडीड एंड ऑल दिस will be coming in your substage. जी बेटा, what is your plan? Okay, ठीक है बेटा, मैं ऑप्टिक के आसमा, विजुअल फील्ड, एनीथिंग एल्स? बाकी समझ में आ गया बेटा? अभी कर देते हैं, ऑप्टिक के आसमा को रिपीट कर देती हूँ मैं। लेट्स गो बैक। Let's go back and do the optic chiasm. बेटा आपको बताया था कि ये जो दो ऑप्टिक नर्व्स हैं, they arise from the retina. ठीक है, ganglion cell. Optic nerves are basically axons from the ganglion cells of the retina. They emerge from the eye, and in the orbit they run posterolaterally. Posterolaterally run करते हुए they enter into the optic canals and then come out of the optic canals. When they come out of the optic canals, they are now lying in the middle cranial fossa. ये middle cranial fossa start हो गया। In the middle cranial fossa, as soon as they come out of the optic canals, they cross over. ठीक है? Crossing over of the two optic nerves makes the optic chiasma. This is what they do. As soon as they come out of the optic canal, the two nerves cross over and they form the optic chiasma. Okay. This optic chiasma, you can see, is lying on top of the pituitary fossa, and pituitary fossa lodges the pituitary gland. So the optic chiasma is lying on top of the pituitary gland. So any tumor of the pituitary gland will obviously affect the optic chiasma. अब optic chiasma में ये देखिए, अच्छा, अब this is the nasal side of the retina, this is the temporal या lateral side of the retina, इस eye के this is the nasal side of the retina and this is the temporal half of the retina. अब optic nerves, when they cross over, they cross over in such a way कि the nasal half के जो fibers हैं, they cross in the optic chiasma, जबकि जो टेम्परल साइड के फाइबर्स हैं they remain uncrossed. यहाँ पर देख लीजिए, temporal half, the fibers from the temporal half of the retina, they remain uncrossed. ठीक है, so optic chiasma के posterolateral angle से emerge की optic tracts. These are the optic tracts. अब ये देखिए, both the optic tracts, start with the right side. ठीक है, इस optic tract में you have fibers, uncrossed fibers of the same side, लेकिन इसमें you have crossed fibers from the opposite side, क्योंकि जो nasal half की fibers cross करते हैं. So if both the optic tracts, one on each side, they carry fibers, uncrossed भी हैं, crossed भी हैं. Uncrossed fibers from the same side, crossed fibers from the opposite side. और ये crossed fibers nasal half के होंगे, uncrossed fibers temporal half के होंगे. ठीक है, so अब दोनों जो optic tracts हैं उसमें दोनों रेटिना से फाइबर्स आ रहे हैं. Crossed fibers from the same side, sorry, uncrossed fibers ये देख लीजिए, temporal half से uncrossed fibers same side, जबकि nasal half के crossed fibers from the opposite side. अब आ जाते हैं visual field. क्या होता है visual field? बेटा, by definition, visual field is simply when you open your eyes and look straight ahead. सीधा देखें, आंखें खुली हुई हो, जो आपको सामने नजर आ रहा है ना, वो विजुअल फील्ड होता है. और ये जो फील्ड ऑफ विजन या विजुअल फील्ड, आप उसको जो मर्जी नाम दे रहे हैं, एक ही चीज है. इसमें जी बेटा समझ आ गई है? ओके, जवेरिया को तो समझ आ गई. थैंक यू माय डियर. अब इसमें ये देखिए कि जो लैटरल साइड है या जो टेम्परल साइड है, इसमें नेजल साइड से जो फील्ड ऑफ विजन जो है फ्रॉम द नेजल साइड, या जो मीडियली जो रेज आएंगी, दे फॉल ऑन द टेम्परल हाफ ऑफ द रेटिना. और जो लैटरल या टेम्परल साइड से मीडियल हाफ या नेजल हाफ ऑफ द रेटिना में फॉल करते हैं. ठीक है, सो इमेजेस फील्ड ऑफ विजन से जो आपको नजर आता है, जो मीडियल साइड से या नेजल साइड से जो है वो टेम्परल हाफ पे फॉल करेगा, और जो टेम्परल साइड से फील्ड ऑफ विजन है वो नेजल या मीडियल हाफ ऑफ द रेटिना पे फॉल करता है. दैट इज हाउ द इमेज फॉर्म्स. ठीक है, नाउ डू वी गो अहेड. हम ऑप्टिक ट्रैक्ट की बात कर रहे हैं. इस ऑप्टिक ट्रैक्ट में देन आई टोल्ड यू द ऑप्टिक ट्रैक्ट इन जी बेटे. ओके, thank you my dear, thank you so much, God bless you. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to ask them. So हमने ऑप्टिक ट्रैक्ट में कहा था कि each optic tract contains fibers from both retina, uncrossed fibers from the same side and crossed fibers from the opposite side. So both the optic tracts, they run posteriorly and laterally, and they go and relay in this structure which is called the lateral geniculate body. अब lateral geniculate body जो है ना, this is a group of nerve cells, nerve cell bodies. The lateral geniculate body is part of the thalamus. Thalamus is part of the diencephalon. Okay. So the fibers in the optic tract go and relay in the lateral geniculate body lying in the thalamus, and from here postsynaptic fibers they arise and they go and relay in the visual cortex. ये जो visual cortex है, this is in the occipital lobe of the brain. ठीक है बेटा? So मैं एक दफा इस सारे उसको एक quick recap दे देती हूँ before we go on to the other nerves. और वो ये है कि field of vision से शुरू कर लेते हैं. Field of vision is what you see when you're looking straight ahead. Field of vision में जो medial side या nasal side की field of vision है, that will fall on the temporal या lateral half of the retina. और जो temporal side से whatever you see is perceived, या the image falls on the medial half of the retina. From the ganglion cells of the retina, axons of the ganglion cells of the retina, they make up the optic nerve. The optic nerve in the orbits run posterolaterally, pass through the optic canal, come out of the optic canal and enter the middle cranial fossa. Middle cranial fossa में, as soon as they come out of the optic canal, they cross over. ठीक है? ये crossing over हो रही है. This crossing over is called optic chiasma. अब इस optic chiasma में what happens is कि fibers from the medial half of the retina या nasal half of the retina ये they cross over. Fibers from nasal half of the retina cross over, जबकि fibers from the temporal half of the retina they remain uncrossed. ठीक है जी? From the temporal half of the retina, the fibers remain uncrossed. Optic chiasma से posterolateral to the optic chiasma arises the optic tract. अब इस optic tract में you have uncrossed fibers from the same retina, same eye, जबकि it contains crossed fibers from the opposite eye. So दोनों जो optic tracts हैं, they will contain fibers from both the retina. From the optic tracts run posteriorly, go and relay in the lateral geniculate body. The synapse over there, lateral geniculate body is part of the thalamus. From the thalamus, postsynaptic fibers arise and they go and relay in the visual cortex. Visual cortex is in the occipital lobe. आगे चलते हैं आप. Now let's come to the third cranial nerve. अच्छा, एक बात, सारी ऑप्टिक नर्व मैंने आपको पढ़ा दी. I hope you appreciate one thing, कि इस सारी ऑप्टिक नर्व में किसी मसल को सप्लाई नहीं किया. It was all sensory, completely sensory, concerned with vision. Optic nerve is purely concerned with vision. It is a purely sensory cranial nerve. Okay? So when we make a list of sensory cranial nerves, so आपकी second cranial nerve, your optic nerve, is the sensory, purely sensory cranial nerves. आपको मैंने पहले बताया था, जो हमारी trigeminal थी, that was mixed cranial nerve. उसमें sensory भी थी, उसमें motor fibers भी थी, क्योंकि वो आपके muscles of mastication को supply करते थे. Mandibular nerve, ophthalmic और maxillary purely sensory थी, जबकि mandibular mixed थी. Facial भी मिक्स्ड क्रेनियल नर्व है, उसमें भी हमने सेंसरी भी किया था, और फिर रिमेम्बर करेक्टली तो मोटर कंपोनेंट उसका उसने मसल्स ऑफ फेशियल एक्सप्रेशन को सप्लाई किया था। अब आ जाते हैं हम थर्ड क्रेनियल नर्व। थर्ड क्रेनियल नर्व इज प्योरली मोटर क्रेनियल नर्व, ठीक है। Motor cranial nerve that supplies the muscles, extraocular muscles, muscles that are lying outside the eye or extraocular, ठीक है। कौन से नर्व्स मसल्स को सप्लाई करती है? ये सप्लाई करती है सुपीरियर रेक्टस, ये ठीक है। इट सप्लाइज द मीडियल रेक्टस, इधर ये लैटरल साइड है बेटा, ये मीडियल साइड है, तो दिस मीडियल रेक्टस को सप्लाई करती है, inferior rectus को सप्लाई करती है, inferior oblique को सप्लाई करती है, and muscles of the eyelid, levator palpebral superioris इसको सप्लाई करती है, ठीक है। So it supplies these four extraocular muscles and one muscle of the eyelid, levator palpebral superioris. Besides that, इसमें एक parasympathetic component भी होता है. Parasympathetic component is responsible for the supply of intraocular muscles, muscles lying inside the eyeball, intraocular. अब उसमें कौन से intraocular muscles हैं? Sphincter pupillae है बेटा, ये pupil है ना, so this is the sphincter pupillae, ये देख लीजिए, ये ciliary muscle है, muscle of the ciliary body, ठीक है। So ciliary muscle को सप्लाई करती है और इसको सप्लाई करती है, circularly arranged sphincter pupillae that controls the diameter of the pupil. Sphincter pupillae, ये वाला, circularly arranged, and it also supplies the ciliary muscles. Ciliaris कहते हैं, ciliary body का muscle है. So intraocular muscles में से it supplies two muscles, sphincter pupillae and ciliaris muscle. अच्छा जी, अब ये जो nerve है, it arises in the midbrain, ठीक है? Arises in the midbrain कहाँ पे? Diaphragm ocelli. This was the diaphragm ocelli. Lateral to the diaphragm ocelli, and then it enters the cavernous sinus, lateral wall of the cavernous sinus. आपको मैंने उस cavernous sinus पढ़ाया था. I told you that there are structures lying that are. This is the midbrain. ये वाला, ये pons है बेटा, ठीक है, ये brain stem की pons है, midbrain pons. This is the cavernous sinus, ये इसकी wall है, और ये this is the substance. ये lesser wing of sphenoid बनाया हुआ है, और ये दो optic nerves हैं. आपको बताया था, यहाँ सेंटर में ये pituitary fossa है, ये एक cavernous sinus है, ये दूसरा cavernous sinus है, lying on the body of the sphenoid and lying in the pituitary fossa. ये pituitary fossa बनाया हुआ है, इसके अंदर pituitary gland है, ठीक है। So this nerve, oculomotor nerve, starts from the midbrain, lateral to the diaphragm ocelli, ठीक है, enters the cavernous sinus, lateral wall of the cavernous sinus. In the lateral wall, from the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus, it comes out and enters the superior orbital fissure. ये superior orbital fissure है. So it enters leaving the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus, it enters the superior orbital fissure. And passing through the superior orbital fissure, it enters into the orbit. The orbit named of that. Up in the superior orbital fissure, it divides into two branches. There are two divisions, एक superior और एक inferior. जो superior division है, that supplies these two muscles, the superior rectus muscle, and this is the levator palpebral superioris. ये दो muscles जो है ना, they are supplied by the superior branch of the superior division. This is the inferior branch. It supplies the medial rectus, inferior rectus and inferior oblique. ये जो तीन muscles हैं, they are supplied by the inferior division या inferior branch. यहाँ पे देख लीजिए ये third cranial nerve passing the diaphragm oculi passes through the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus and enters into the superior orbital tissue. ठीक है जी? Any questions so far? अच्छा जी, यहाँ पे बड़ी अच्छी ड्राइंग ये बनाई हुई है. इस ड्राइंग में ये देख लीजिए, ये superior oblique muscle है. This is the superior rectus. ये medial rectus है, ये inferior rectus है, ये inferior oblique. तो ये जो green है ना, this green is the third nerve, oculomotor nerve. It is supplying the levator palpebrae superioris, A, superior rectus, the medial rectus, inferior rectus and inferior oblique. ठीक है? अब जो इसकी inferior division है ना, this is the oculomotor nerve, arises from the midbrain by two types of fibers, purely motor fibers है, और जो purple में है, ये या blue में है, ये parasympathetic fibers है. Together they make up the oculomotor nerve. Up the oculomotor nerve runs down, divides into two divisions: superior supplying the levator palpebrae superioris and inferior supplying the superior rectus muscle. The inferior division. अब inferior division में ये जो parasympathetic fibers हैं, they run with the inferior division. Inferior division में ये motor fibers जो हैं, they supply the medial rectus, the inferior rectus and inferior oblique. Red जो है इसमें purely motor fibers. आप देख लीजिए कि purely motor fibers arising and supplying all this red. अब आपको मैंने ये भी बताया था कि parasympathetic fibers run with the inferior division of the oculomotor nerve. ठीक है? और वहां से भी they run down with the nerve to the inferior oblique. So parasympathetic fibers जो हैं, they run with the nerve to the inferior oblique. Actually, so they run with the nerve, parasympathetic fibers run with the nerve to the inferior oblique. Parasympathetic fibers leave this nerve to the inferior oblique. They come down and lay in the ciliary ganglion. Ciliary ganglion is a ganglion, parasympathetic ganglion of the head and neck. I told you earlier on, we have 4 parasympathetic ganglion in the head and neck. 2 हम पहले कर चुके हैं, optic कर लिया था, pterygopalatine भी हमने कर लिया. Now we come to the third ganglion, which is the ciliary ganglion, the ganglion related to the eye. ठीक है? So ये parasympathetic fibers, they leave the nerve to the inferior oblique and they go and relay in the ciliary ganglion. From the ciliary ganglion, postganglionic fibers, they go and supply the ciliary muscles of the ciliary body, and this circular muscle, the sphincter pupil. ये 2 muscles, not the dilator, please. ठीक है बच्चे? अब ये जो fibers that arise from the ciliary ganglion, postganglionic fibers, they run in the short ciliary nerve. So you जो supply कर रही है ciliary muscles को और sphincter pupilli को, they are the short ciliary nerves. अभी तक is it clear? Do we have any questions? No questions? Fine, that's great. सारा समझ आ गया. Let's come to the lesion of the oculomotor nerve. Beta, in cases of oculomotor nerve palsy, damage to the oculomotor nerve, the muscles that are supplied by the oculomotor nerve obviously are going to be paralyzed. अब वो muscles कौन थे? Medial rectus, inferior rectus, inferior oblique, superior rectus, levator palpebris superioris, intraocular muscles में से ciliary muscles या ciliaris and sphincter pupilli. ठीक है? As a result of damage, जब levator palpebris superioris, that will be damaged, paralyzed. Levator palpebris means it elevates the eyelid. So जब ये damage होगा, तो the eye will droop. इस तरह partially close हो जाएगी. This is the open eye. This is a drooping eyelid. अब ciliary muscles, sphincter pupilli damage हो गया. जब sphincter pupilli damage हो गया, इसका काम constriction of the pupil था. So जो dilator है, उसका action will be marked. So you will have a dilated pupil. The inferior rectus is paralyzed. The inferior oblique is paralyzed. Only the superior oblique is and lateral oblique जो है, lateral rectus वो intact है. Superior oblique is intact. As a result, superior oblique का action क्या है? Downwards and outwards movement. So as a result, सिर्फ superior oblique का action intact होगा. तो उसकी वजह से the downwards and outwards look of the affected eye. Any questions? Let's come to the next nerve, which is the fourth cranial nerve. Fourth cranial nerve is also called the trochlear nerve. Once again, this is a purely motor nerve, and it's the smallest nerve. ठीक है? सबसे thin, the smallest nerve. अब ये भी midbrain से आती है. Third and fourth, both the nerves arise from the midbrain. Now the trochlear nerve arises from the posterior aspect of the posterior surface of the midbrain. Then it goes round the midbrain and comes onto the anterior surface of the midbrain. Okay. It is running along the margin of the inner border of the tentorium. ये देख लीजिए, ये tentorium है, ये tentorial notch बनने की. So this nerve is running along the inner border of the tentorium. ये fourth nerve. ठीक है जी? अच्छा जी. From the margin of the tentorium, immediately in front of the tentorium, you have the cavernous sinus. So this nerve enters into the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus. पहले हमने third cranial nerve lateral wall में डाली. Now we have the fourth cranial nerve lying in the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus. From the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus, the fourth cranial nerve enters into the superior orbital fissure. ये देख लीजिए. ये है बारीक सी. This is the fourth cranial nerve lying in the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus. यहाँ से sinus की wall हटाई गई है. This is the third cranial nerve. ये, and this is the fourth cranial nerve entering the superior orbital fissure. Periorbital fissure, say it comes into the orbit, or it supplies just one muscle, and that is the superior oblique. This is the superior oblique. इसको trochlear nerve supply करती है. Superior oblique आपको पता है, it runs around the trochlea. That is why this nerve is called the trochlear nerve. So God has made one cranial nerve for just one muscle. इसकी lesion में क्या होता है? This is what it is. This is how the affected eye looks like. अब otherwise तो ठीक है, लेकिन when you look at the eyeball, this is what the location is. Superior oblique का action होता है, it turns the eye downwards and outwards. So when you're looking straight, everything is all right, but when you're looking down, it will get downward movement and outward movement. Instead, the eye deviates to the opposite side. Inferior oblique action आ जाता है. Inferior oblique action is to turn the eye upwards and inwards. So this is what the eye becomes. So अब एक eye इधर देख रही है, एक eye straight देख रही है. Obviously, the two eyes are not in the same line. So the person has double vision, also called diplopia. So looking straight is all right. Even when the person looks down or wants to go down the stairs, तो फिर उसको double vision start हो जाती है. अच्छा जी. So far, any questions? Any questions, beta? No. Once again, we come to this abducent nerve, the sixth cranial nerve. Sixth cranial nerve is the abducent nerve. It is a purely motor nerve. Trochlear, purely motor. Oculomotor, purely motor. So third, fourth, sixth cranial nerves, they are purely motor nerves. Okay? Second cranial nerve, optic, purely sensory nerve. Once again, God has made one cranial nerve for just one muscle. This cranial nerve, sixth cranial nerve, is for the supply of lateral rectus muscle. Okay? So it supplies the lateral rectus muscle. अब ये देख लीजिए, it enters, ये emerge करता है between the groove, ये medulla है, this is the pons. ये fifth cranial nerve arising from the surface of the pons. So this sixth cranial nerve emerges in the groove between medulla and pons. ये देखिए, इन दोनों के junction पे से ये nerve arise कर रही है. Running on, this is the basilar artery. Running on the surface of the pons is the basilar artery. So this sixth cranial nerve runs on either side of the basilar artery. ये जो है, this is the pons, this is the medulla, this is the sixth cranial nerve. ये fifth cranial nerve है from the surface of the pons. ये fourth cranial nerve trochlear, अभी जो हमने पढ़ी है. ये third cranial nerve है oculomotor. This is the second cranial nerve, optic. This is the optic chiasma, ये optic tracts है. First हम बाद में करेंगे. ठीक है? So this cranial nerve bends over, अब ये petrous part of the temporal bone है ये. So this cranial nerve bends over the petrous part of the temporal bone and enters into the cavernous sinus. अब ये pituitary fossa है, sphenoid bone, body of the sphenoid. Lying on either side of the body of the sphenoid, you have the cavernous sinus. So this nerve, sixth cranial nerve, adducent, enters into the cavernous sinus, running in between the veins, cavernous veins. Cavernous sinus is full of cavernous veins. So this nerve is lying inside cavernous sinus in between these veins. Up, if you remember correctly, running in the substance of the cavernous sinus was this internal carotid artery. So ये जो sixth cranial nerve है, this is running inside the cavernous sinus, ये देख लीजिए, along with the lying infralateral to the internal carotid artery. ये cavernous sinus है, ये all these veins, ये lateral wall है. Third cranial nerve, fourth cranial nerve. And then you have first two divisions of the fifth cranial nerve. Maxillary, sorry, ophthalmic, and then maxillary. So oculomotor, trochlear, ophthalmic, and maxillary division of the trigeminal. The third, fourth, fifth cranial nerves are lying in the wall of the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus, and sixth cranial nerve is running along with the internal carotid artery, lying within the substance of the cavernous sinus. अब ये देख लीजिए, pons, sorry, medulla और ये pons. Pons और medulla के junction पे से emerge की runs over the petrous part of, runs over ये clivus है, ये clivus है, and this is the apex of the petrous temple. So it runs over the clivus, crossing the apex of the petrous temporal bone, enters the substance of the cavernous sinus with the internal carotid artery, and then it passes through the superior orbital fissure. A superior orbital fissure में से it enters the tendinous ring. अब आपको बताया था कि inside the orbit ये optic nerve है, and surrounding the orbit and this is the superior orbital fissure. So surrounding the dilated part of the superior orbital fissure and also enclosing the optic canal. This is a ring, a tendon ring made up of tendinous ring. This say extraocular muscles arise. Okay? So now lying inside the ring, you have nerves outside the ring entering from the superior orbital fissure but lying outside the tendinous ring. Then you have nerves, other nerves that enter the orbit but are lying inside the tendinous ring. So inside the tendinous ring, you have two divisions of the third cranial nerve, oculomotor, superior division, inferior division. And then you have this sixth cranial nerve, adducens. ये भी tendinous ring के अंदर से pass करते हैं, जबकि trochlear nerve जो है, that passes outside the tendinous ring. ये ठीक है जी. वहां से now this abducent nerve, sixth nerve, then goes to supply the lateral rectus muscle और supply करता है on the medial surface. ये देख लीजिए, ये बाहर lateral surface है, ये medial surface है. It goes and supplies the medial surface of the lateral rectus muscle. अब एक ही muscle है, उसका एक ही action है. Lateral rectus moves the eye laterally या abducts the eye. जब lateral rectus paralyzed होगा, damage to this nerve causes paralysis of lateral rectus. जब lateral rectus paralyzed होगा, तो obviously the eye cannot be abducted or moved laterally. So the medial rectus pulls the eye inwards. So this is what happens. The affected eye is pulled inwards by the action of the medial rectus. As a result, the patient, when tries to look straight, so the eye turns in medially. अब एक आँख जो है वो medially move कर गया है, दूसरी आँख is looking straight. As a result, the patient is unable to look straight. इसको double vision होगा. ठीक है जी. Now do we have any questions? कोई questions? I covered 4 cranial nerves today. 2 हम पहले कर चुके हैं, so out of 12 we've done 6 already. Any questions, बच्चे? We still have a few minutes. कोई नहीं है, so I guess आप लोगों ने शायद कुछ भी नहीं सुना. Anyway, never mind. Okay. Optic nerve revise कर दें. Fine. मैं अभी कर देती हूँ. We still have 4 minutes. So I'll do it in 2 minutes. No problem. जी बेटा. दूसरा क्या है? अच्छा डबल विजन वाला पॉइंट रिपीट कर देती हूँ. फिर उसके बाद ऑप्टिक नर्व पे चले जाते हैं. बेटा देखो लैटरल रेक्टस का काम क्या है. लैटरल रेक्टस टर्न्स द आई आउटवर्ड्स, ठीक है, या एब्डक्ट्स द आई. जब लैटरल रेक्टस डैमेज हो जाएगा बिकॉज डैमेज टू द ट्रॉक्लियर टू द एब्ड्यूसिव नर्व, 6th cranial nerve supplies just one muscle and that is the trochlea, the lateral rectus. अब जब lateral rectus डैमेज हो जाएगा तो medial rectus is normal, ठीक है. So that medial rectus will pull the eye inwards because medial rectus का काम है turning the eye inwards. अब ये हर वक्त तो नहीं होता ना. When the person is trying to look straight, looking straight means there has to be a balance between the lateral rectus and the medial rectus. इस केस में lateral rectus तो है ही नहीं, डैमेज हो गया है. So medial rectus active है. The medial rectus will pull the eye inwards. When the medial rectus pulls the eye inwards, now one eye is looking straight, the other eye is looking inwards. उसका रिजल्ट क्या होगा? अब रेटिना पे 2 विजन्स बनेंगे, एक इस आई से और एक इस आई से. अदरवाइज तो दोनों विजन्स अगर स्ट्रेट हम देखें, नॉर्मल आई हो, तो बोथ द visions from both the eye, they fall on the same point on the retina and you get one single vision. लेकिन इसमें the 2 eyes are in different directions, so 2 visions fall on the retina. When 2 visions fall on the retina, you see 2 structures, and that double vision is called diplopia. There have it. Let's quickly go on to the second cranial nerve. Second cranial nerve की lesions मैं आपको बाद में करवाऊंगा, next class में करवाऊंगी इंशाल्लाह. 1 minute left. Purely sensory nerve, ठीक है. और इस nerve, this arises from the retina, innermost layer, ganglion cells layer. Ganglion cell layer के ganglion cell layer से कि जो axons हैं, they make up this optic nerve. These ये innermost layer है, sclera, choroid, retina, from outside in. So from the innermost layer, it pierces the choroid, it pierces the sclera, and goes out. This is how the optic nerve is formed. So the area where the axons of the retina, ganglion cells, where they pierce the sclera, वहाँ पे sclera पे छलनी हो जाता है, सुराख ही सुराख. That is why it is called lamina. खत्म हो गया time? Okay, my dear. I will read this next time. Thank you, beta.